Today is August 8th edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source, and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois agriculture, we were glad you're here. I am glad to join with you guys on a Thursday. Almost it's Friday. Otherwise, this time is for serious business for your agricultural news on Back Roads of Illinois. Barometer is pretty lower. Farmland's value has been increased to the markets. The World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate Report. The barometer is pretty lower because some farmers are concerned about the economy and lower commodity prices. Presidential candidates. The barometer is coming from Purdue University. Some analyses say that Farm Bill has a big role in the agricultural industry because it's not passing it for this year in Washington, D.C. The farmland's value is going to be up by the markets are doing well. However, there is some concerns about the Commonwealth of agricultural industry in the Midwest. Due fact is the commodity prices are currently down. The World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate Report is coming out for this Monday morning at 11 Central Time from the Department of Agriculture. Some traders are looking for the soybean demand for this month report. We were coming back to talk about tar spot on Back Roads of Illinois with Ashton Bailey from Evergreen FS in Greater Peoria area and Jeff French from American Ag in Wiota, Iowa about commodities markets. Stay tuned on Back Roads of Illinois. Today, we were joining with Bailey Ashton from Evergreen FS on Back Roads of Illinois. He is a tar spot expert for Evergreen FS in Greater Peoria area. Welcome to the show. How are you, Scott?
I am doing great. This is a great time of year where we get to take time and visit with growers, scout fields, and prepare for next year's conversations and engagements. I'm happy to be here to go over tar spot in Central Illinois and answer any questions.
Let's start our conversation about the tar spot in Central Illinois.
That makes us so happy. Yeah, that makes us so happy. We've had to come here and that you don't think about it.
Do you see more tar spot on the corn crop in Central Illinois?
Yeah, so tar spot is a fungal disease that takes hold in environments where there are high spore counts with wet, humid, and cooler weather conditions. Tar spot in past years has not been a huge concern when it comes to impacting yield in Central Illinois, but in recent years, with more unpredictable weather later in the season, we have seen tar spot become a more serious issue. This year is no exception to that, and although I have not seen tar spot as heavily as I have, in our recent years, that may change as weather conditions begin to cool and humidity persists here later in the season. Tar spot thrives in that prolonged, cooler but humid weather conditions where moisture sits on the leaves. Yeah, we have not gotten a lot of readings in the Central Illinois belt, but keep your eyes peeled because we are starting to see that cooler weather come in. Yes, so weather conditions, such as storms or winds and things like that, can bring that spore count up and move through. We have seen, especially in that southern Illinois, we've seen some of our sensors start to show heavily prevalence of spore counts, but it hasn't quite reached central or northern Illinois just yet.
Can you tell our listeners, what do you recommend on fungicide?
Absolutely. Beyond just fungicide application, there's a few things you can do. First is just making sure that, when you do apply a fungicide, that it reaches deep into the canopy. Farmers do this in a myriad of ways. Um, Airplane application and drone application tend to get deeper into the canopy, but it's really critical you get, deep into that canopy when you apply. Rotating crops is another way that you can be preventative on disease taking hold in place, and then also selecting more tolerant hybrids. But beyond that, if you're seeing a heavily prevalence of tar spot, and you're starting to see that disease take hold, you're going to want to apply fungicides in that R1 and R2 stage, possibly even R3 if the disease appears late. Some of the fungicides that are just on the market that are known to be a very good tar spot treatment is Revitec, Valtima, Miravis Neo, and Delaro Complete, amongst others, and that's just according to Purdue's recommendations on product selection there. But there are a myriad of other fungicides that also would help prevent and treat any sort of infection that would occur.
How about this time could you apply for the corn on the R3?
Yeah. So you could apply on R3.
Is there anything would you like to tell our listeners about your plans for the tar spot and for Evergreen FS in Central Illinois?
Yep, at Evergreen FS, we have taken a disease management program just a little farther than your typical fungicide sale. We've implemented a disease management program to enhance our management on the fungicide application. And what that entails is that we have sensors in fields that tell us what the spore counts are in the field. That includes tar spot readings. This allows us to, in season, know when spore counts are very high. We also have a model that we have within our system that takes those spore counts and analyzes them and tells growers in our company, whether the weather conditions have been prolonged and ideal for tar spot and other diseases. And so because of that, we're able to tell growers, weather conditions are ideal and the spore counts are high, which means that it's very likely that tar spot will take hold in your field within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And tar spot is a disease where it does take a little bit longer to show in the field. So our programs and our data and our infield sensors allow us to really direct farmers to get that higher ROI on the farm. Because previously, we just apply off a grow stage. But if you're an evergreen farmer and you do fungicide business with us, you will also have that added insights into when
See
those
that email
diseases
from Donna.
are possibly taking hold.
Do you have any recommendations on the beans? Do you have any fusset?
On beans, currently, actually, we're having a very interesting year where we actually had, not us personally, but we had a third party that we worked with that did trials on just disease prevalence in soybeans. And there was very little disease prevalence in beans, which we found to be surprising just because, how wet things have been. But I think, when we're talking about disease in soybeans and disease in corn, um, soybeans they're a variety, right? You have a variety of genetics, and a lot of the soybeans on the market have been bred to be extremely resistant to disease. And a lot of growers are gearing towards and gearing towards buying those highly resistant soybean plants. And because soybeans are varieties or a variety of genetics, it makes them better at being more disease resistant versus corn is a hybrid, so you've got a 50% mix genetically. And so corn in general is just more susceptible to disease, and it's harder to, breed corn that is just all around resistant to all disease. So you tend to deal with and see disease issues more in corn than you do in beans. But with soybeans this year, there have been some pockets. We've seen some white mold alerts and disease in their area. So disease is very microclimate based, and so with those sensors in the fields, it really allows us to hone in on which farmers maybe do need to apply for their soybeans, and which farmers maybe don't, just because that hot pocket of spores, and environment and weather conditions isn't there. So, but I will say overall this year, looking at beans, I have not seen as much disease this year.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts are just, continue to scout the fields, continue to have your eyes on, especially those areas in your fields that are going to be more stressed. Some of those areas that maybe are ridges or have more sandy soils, and that crop is going to be more stressed, because those are going to be the areas that if you do have disease, will get it first. So, get out in the fields, check those areas that tend to be problem areas, and keep your eyes peeled, because I do think that we're going to see disease later in season this year, especially with tar spot. I think tar spot will come in later this year than we're used to seeing it. So stay diligent and reach out at FS and reach out to your local FS crop advisor if you have any questions or need any help with recommendations.
Thanks, ma'am. Welcome back to the show. Thanks to Ashton Bailey from Evergreen FS in Greater Peoria area. All right, this time is for your commodity markets with Jeff French from American Ag in Wiota, Iowa. We were welcoming to Jeff on back roads of Illinois. How are you been, Jeff?
Caesar, I've been excellent. Been very fortunate with good weather this summer. Excellent rain earlier here in central Iowa and western Iowa. There is huge potential here in Iowa. Got to get a couple rains here in August, but all in all, in general, we haven't seen crops look like this in many, many years.
Let's start with our conversation about updating on crop progress report from the Midwest.
So the crop progress report, we were expecting beans conditions to decline 1% to 2%, but they actually came in at 68% good to excellent, increasing 1% from the previous week, which during this time of year, late July, early August, for the crops to continually look better and do better is really counter-seasonal. And that's why we've seen the pressure here, especially on the soybeans, but also the corn. Today, we had fresh new low closes, 3.5 to 4 year low closes in both corn and beans. December corn 397 close, and November beans 1008 close. So the general good conditions, excellent conditions, and then no really sight of any weather threats out there during the month of August. I know not every place is perfect, but in general, we have a very good crop here for the second week of August here.
How about the crop conditions in the state of Iowa?
They're look, I mean, besides, they had the flooding up in the Northwest, and the USDA came out between South Dakota, Minnesota, and northern Iowa. There was 70,000 acres of corn that got flooded, and 46,000 acres of beans. So yes, obviously a huge deal if it's your fields. But if you look at it in a whole, 91 million acres of corn and 88 million acres of beans. In all, when you hire the entire country together, it's not that big of a problem. But the crops right now, it's some of the best crops that I've seen in Iowa in many, many years.
How is the yields for Northwest Iowa and South Dakota?
Well, they have good potential. I mean, there's going to be holes there with the flooding. No question. I was up here 2 weeks ago. I was up in Lake Okoboji, which, is just north of Spencer, which was one of the hearts of the most flooded areas. So a lot of the fields do have actual drown out spots. I mean, there's just nothing growing. The latest USDA report where they counted those acres, that does not include the drowned out areas. So yeah, their yield is going to drag, and it's probably going to be something that affects the market locally down the road. I mean, there's a lot of ethanol, there's a lot of cattle feeders in that area, so the basis will do the work. I expect them to have a pretty hot basis. How it affects the board here totally, you're talking about 5% of the total corn crop. You can't really focus on 5% of the crop when your other 95% of your growing area is doing a very good job, potentially record production here this year.
Do you have any concerns about soybean futures for the next couple of months until November?
Well, I just think that, we have the potential out there to have a very strong, very good soybean yields. And if you look at our demand, especially for next year 24-25 marketing year, which begins on September 1st, if you look at the Chinese purchases so far on the books, they're at 19-year lows. I mean, they just do not have very many commitments of bean purchases here for this new coming year from the United States. Now, they've booked a lot from Brazil and Argentina, but they have definitely tapped the brakes on there. So that is a story that, they can make it up, no question. I mean, we're just getting into, but they really should buy from the United States September into January as we are harvesting our new crop beans. So that is something that is very well on the forefront, but and that's, look at this. I mean, 1008 close here in November. Again, a 3.5-year low. We're down since the May high about $2.20. So what's stopping them from buying? That's the real big question. And again, I just don't know the answer to that. So yeah, it looks like we could grind lower here as long as the weather during the month of August is non-threatening. And we do see some rain falling throughout the Midwest.
What is the export numbers from Brazil to China?
Top of my head, what Brazil has sold China here during the last year, but I know I've been seeing that it is a record, but the number, I do not have that off the top of my head here right now.
Is there anything would you like to go to tell our listeners about the cattle markets for right now with the economy?
Absolutely. We are in full hedge mode. Any type of steer, heifer that you plan to sell, calf, feeder calf that you plan to sell here in the next 6 months, we are absolutely buying put options on them. We just saw a really sharp sell-off here during the last week because of economic concerns. And the problem I don't like here today, I mean, you got the stock market up sharply. You have the big Dow up 660 points. You have the S&P up 113, and you have the NASDAQ at 508 points. But you look at the cattle futures, they're all down $1 to $2. So yes, very concerned. And you have to look back to this, and I know most cattle guys know this, but I mean, we're 7 to 10% off the highs. Back when we had a really bad sell-off back in that 2014, 2015 timeframe, the cattle futures broke over 40% off the highs. So we all know what cattle futures can do, and we all know that this is nothing to do with fundamentals. This is all about perception. And right now in the futures market, perception is reality, and there's been a huge money flow out of the cattle here the last 5 to 7 trading days.
How is the cattle markets for today?
They were lower across the board. Again, very disappointing. Fat cattle were down $1.30 to $1.40, and the feeders were down anywhere from $2.10 to $2.40 a hundred. So you got January down here at 232. 7 trading sessions, we were 255. So we've definitely taken some off the top here in a very quick fashion, but you cannot get into that mind frame that this could be, this could be it. Because we all know, we've all seen what cattle have done in the past, and what's stopping them from doing it again here. That's the question, but we know how to place a put option underneath it. If the futures continue to go down, that put options gains in value and helps alleviate the blow when the cattle cattle prices continue to move lower.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, it's just time for action. I mean, the cattle are signaling a major red flag here. So, I've been doing it the last 2 to 3 days, contacting everybody because we've been talking about it here for the last couple of months that, the sell-off in cattle is not going to come from the supply side. The supply side is very friendly. If you look at the supply of cattle here for the next 12 to 18 months, it's very bullish. But again, it comes down to money flow, and we've seen it here in the last 5 to 7 trading sessions. Open interest is down over 40,000 contracts. So don't get in the boat that this thing can't move any lower. We're only 7 to 10% off the recent highs.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Caesar. Have a great day.
That's Jeff French from American Ag on back roads of Illinois. That's Jeff French from. This is your commodity markets update on back roads of Illinois. Corn futures finished and down 8 to 4 cents. Soybean futures finished and down 7 to 4 cents. Wheat futures finished and down 4 to 6 cents. Now that we are going to talk about the livestock market for today's program on back roads of Illinois. Cattle futures finished and down 7 to 9 cents. Feeder cattle and down 8 to 9 cents. Lean hogs finished and down 8 to 9 cents. Crude oil finished and down 8 to 9 cents. Dow Jones finished and down 8 points. Thanks to Ashton Bailey from Evergreen FS and Jeff French from American Ag. We're running out of time on our show, but you can listen to our show wherever you get your podcast. For Back Roads of Illinois, I am Cesar Delgado. Have a great day.